I hope you all slept well. I know one of my guys did. You know, first and foremost, I didn't mind my manners last night, and we were very neglectful. And I know to a lot of you think this thing just comes together, you know, that somebody opens it up and you just come together and everything is all taken care of when you get here. But we have some people who work very hard and very diligently to arrange the rooms and arrange the accommodations, to intercede for us with the administration of this thing to keep it balanced. And State Fair, they put in a lot of time and effort, what I'm trying to say. My job is the easiest one of all. All I got to do is just talk for 3 days. So I want the guys who are basically the underground committee. You know, I don't like the word committee. You all know what a camel is, don't you? It was a horse that was put together by a committee. But there's guys, you guys who do all this work, stand up. Don't be bashful. You know who you are. I'm not going to point fingers at you. Todd, Glenn. We have one who's so humble he doesn't know it. Stand up, Miller. Sit down. Now, these guys work, I mean, they work hard, and I'm very appreciative of it because they make it a lot easier to do what we're supposed to do here. Well, to the best of my ability, I tried to take you to the first 3 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous last night. But now, when you get to there, you come to the meat and potatoes of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now we rise to the point, if we got through the 3rd step prayer, we've come to a point where we're finally going to have to do something besides just think about it and talk about it and dream about it. We have to get down to taking some positive actions. And that's where you start in the 4th step. It says we take a searching and a fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That's what really is the beginning of a program of recovery. The first 3 steps are admission steps, and they're things you can read about, and you can turn them over into your mind, and you can do them, and you can swallow a lot of things if you're desperate enough. My personal experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is that the program of recovery is almost like a domino effect. You can't take one without the other one following closely behind it. And the more they fall, the more you get involved and the more you have to do. This old stuff, say, well, you know, I've had people tell me I'm working on my 4th step. After the 3rd or 4th slip, they're still working on their 4th step. And it goes on and on and on. It's just a continuous thing. There was a question here last night, when do you start taking people through the steps? Well, you start taking the steps when you come to Alcoholics Anonymous. When you get a sponsor to help you do these things and you attach yourself to a home group, you're already starting to get into a program of recovery. All these things are essential for recovery because you don't know enough on your own hook and your self-centered, self-driven lives to be able to do these things on your own hook. You just can't do it. You have to have examples. You have to have people go before you to talk to you, to sort out the misinformation that goes through your head, people who are actually doing things, and you go to the book for reference points of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so it requires some effort, and it requires bringing other people into play. But the first thing you have to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, it really requires some effort, is you take a searching and a fearless moral inventory of yourselves. Now, what in the world could possibly be wrong with taking a searching and a fearless moral inventory of ourselves? Basically, most of us have taken a searching inventory of ourselves and others all of our lives. We know what everybody else is doing wrong, which doesn't reflect us. Usually what we see other people doing is reflections of ourselves. I was told a long, long time ago, I said to this old man who was the only father I've ever known, I said, it seems to me that I'm becoming what I see. He says, you're starting to get the idea. What you basically see is what you are. If you look out and see nothing but scorn, if you look out and see nothing but tragedies and all this other kind of stuff, that's just you. But what if you can get up in the morning and look out at a beautiful sunrise or out on the ocean and see God's creation there? That is being one of the children of God. And it also happens right here. After we did the third step prayer, it says next, it says down at the very bottom of page 63, after the prayer, it says, this was only a beginning, though, if honestly and humbly made, an effect sometimes a very great one was felt at once. That's when the dominant. Next, we launched out on a course of rigorous action, the first step of which is personal house cleaning, that many of us have never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have very permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort to face and rid ourselves of the things that has been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions, and therefore we started on a personal inventory. This was step 4. Now, the problem with step 4, it's followed by step 5. That's what's scary about step 4. You know, sitting down and braggadociously, the funny part about it is what's going on up here is not what comes out here. The hardest part about taking an inventory is a pencil and paper. You got to get a pencil, and you got to get a piece of paper, and you got to start writing it down. Now, I guess since the advent and the induction of money into Alcoholics Anonymous, or in the treatment of alcoholism, I guess there's been more ways and more designs and more forms to take a 4th step than there's been people who've taken them. I mean, they've got some of those things that you'd have to have 4 master's and college degrees to answer the first 3 questions on them. They're really ridiculous. And everybody's got one. Everybody dreams up their own personal little ideas about how to help do this thing. And nobody ever looks on page 65. People who come up with all this nonsense have never read this book. There's a foolproof way to take an inventory. It covers every single thing that an alcoholic needs to cover in his program of recovery to do a searching and a fearless moral inventory. It's called a 4-column inventory. And there are the first 3 columns is I'm resentful at, the cause, and it affects my, whatever it is. And basically it's sex relations, self-esteem, fear, sex relations, self-esteem, fear, security and self-esteem, and everything is bracketed by fear. The book says, driven by 1,000 nameless fears, we step on people's toes and they retaliate. Now, the most crucial column in here is not listed. And that one is, what's my part in it? What did I do to cause this? That's over on the next page. What is my part in it? And that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to assume blame for any of our actions. You can hear it at any AA meeting you go to. Well, I was drunk when I did that, you know. I'm an alcoholic, that's why I act that way. Bullshit. Take that off the tape, Mark. It's not true. If you're a drunken ditch digger, there's a good chance you're going to be a sober ditch digger. Behavior is behavior, no matter how you do it. If you behave a certain way while drinking, you will behave a certain way while sober. The basic nature of a human being does not change one iota. Alcohol, and later on if you have been induced to them, drugs will give you not the courage so much, but the painlessness of it to live with your actions that you've done in the past. That's where the inventory comes out. That's why the inventory is so very important, that you have to write this inventory because you have to put it down on paper exactly what you did and who you did it to. You have a list, you make a list of people, it'll come in handy later on. You make this list, you put down who you're mad at, who you're resentful at, why you're resentful at them, What does it do to affect me? Does it keep me bound in fear? To keep me in resentments? What does it? And what did I do to create this situation? That's the point of the inventory. Your part in it. It's not who you're mad at, what it affects, cause and condition. That's all fine and dandy. They're in there. But the main purpose of an inventory is to create my pattern in my mind for what I did, how I can clean up the wreckage of my past, because that is the demon that kills alcoholics. The actions of your past are the demons that kill alcoholics, that drive us back to drinking. And if you don't clean up the wreckage of your past, if you don't clean up your unfinished business, you will drink again if you're an alcoholic. You can only hide and duck and dodge and so long. And now they have another bupper that's being introduced all over Alcoholics Anonymous in epidemic proportions. It's called antidepressants. There's no need to take a step if you're on antidepressants. It's a lot easier to swallow something than it is to take an inventory. You just kind of coast on through there. The book says, we went back to our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Now, the funny part about it is, most of us don't know the true from the false. The book says, we don't know it. We think our alcoholic life is the only normal one. So we don't know the true from the false. So how are we going to find out? We're going to write it down on a piece of paper. It's different on a piece of paper than it is the way I see it. Really. Sitting on a yard talking with the guys in the penitentiary, I'm talking about a Marilyn Monroe type woman, man, that I'm with out there. And when I put it down on paper, it was a blue-eyed sheep in Montana. You people from Palmdale get a kick out of that, don't you? But that's how abstract the mind is. Cunning, baffling. That's why we got to brainwash this thing. That's what this is all about. This is about a mental obsession, a self-centered obsession that I do no wrong, I'm a victim of circumstances. That thing has popped out and just destroyed more people than anything that I know of. I'm a victim. It's not my fault. They used me, if only. And all that victimization does is kill an alcoholic. It kills alcoholics. It's just not your fault. But you see what that is? If it's not your fault, there's no guilt. But what is the underlying fact about no fault? If you're not at fault and there's no guilt, you create a resentment for the person who robbed you of that. And my book speaks about resentment, the number one killer. So I have to assume the responsibilities of my own action. When I was sitting in a penitentiary, and I was new, I was in AA, and we had 3 or 4 guys. They're like in any meeting that you go to, 3 or 4 of them guys who know everything about AA who aren't in it. Those are the people who know the most about it. They'll tell you. And there's these kind of guys who joined AA while they were in the penitentiary, and they got out and went to AA outside, but somehow or other, the program failed them, and they were back in the penitentiary again. But they were the prime examples of AA in the penitentiary, not to me. I watched them. I watched everything they did, because even as sick as I was and as self-centered as I was and as backward as I was, I knew that something was wrong. Well, what I was reading in this book was not what they were portraying. Very simple. What I was reading in this book is not what they were portraying. They were portraying losers. They were saying that Alcoholics Anonymous had failed them. That they had tried Alcoholics Anonymous and had failed because Alcoholics Anonymous had failed them. That did not register with me because I was reading this book. And I had assumed the idea that if you put this program to work in your life and practice it on a daily basis and done the things that it says to do, you would not have to be doing and standing up as a loser in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's something wrong with that picture. Even then, as dense as I was and as far back as I was, I knew there was something wrong with that picture. So I watched them. And one day a guy came in on a panel. He was very specific. He said, I just want to ask a couple questions. I don't want to talk. He says, how many of you people in here have tried Alcoholics Anonymous before and failed? I looked down the front row where the elitists were sitting. And they all held up their hands. If they hadn't, I wouldn't have told them to hold up their hand. And he said, now I want to ask you a question. How many of you worked this fourth and fifth step in its entirety? Not one of those hands went up. The very next day, I had a tablet and a pencil writing an inventory. And I wrote till I was exhausted. I wrote until I was ready to slit my throat, because I got to see me on paper for what I really was, without any excuse, without any blame, without blaming alcohol, without blaming heroin, without blaming my parents, without blaming anything. I got to see me and my actions for what I was. And I was dangerous to me. And when I can't stand that stuff, I've only got one recourse when I'm faced with the truth about myself. I either drink or I give it away. And that's what the fifth step is all about. I'm driven to a certain point in my life when I know the exact truth about me. And I don't want to know the truth about me because I spent a lifetime hiding me from everything around me by my trapestries, by my machoism, by my badism, by my violence, by my dress, by my money, by my property, by my women, by everything. I sent all that tapestry hiding me from everybody else. And more important, I hid me from me. I don't want to expose myself to somebody. But I did. I knocked on a man's door. And I said to him, I have to talk to you. And I sat down with this man. I told him about every rotten, filthy, corruptible thing I'd ever done in my life. And when somewhere in there, I heard myself say to that man that I was an alcoholic. Somewhere in there. I can't tell you time, moments, but way down here had been that knowledge of what's wrong with me. And by that time, I was deep into a solution of recovery called Alcoholics Anonymous. I remember walking out of that man's office that day. I remember what he said to me. He says, my God, Johnny, haven't you ever done anything decent in your entire life? And I looked over my shoulder and said, no, I don't think so. And if I did, it doesn't count. We're not talking about assets here. We're talking about liabilities. The assets take care of themselves. The liabilities are the things we got to be rid of. I know there's controversial theory about that, but my assets never got me in trouble. My kindness and my consideration of others, even though I had none, never got me in any trouble, and never got you in any trouble either. What got you in trouble was your selfish, self-centered defects of character. Fifth step. I remember that day as clearly as I remember 5 minutes ago. I remember walking out of that man's office. I remember sitting down underneath a tree. I was up in the mountains, up in Tehachapi, inside of a penitentiary. And I sit down and for the first time in my life, I was entirely free. Free. Being in a penitentiary or being outside of a penitentiary doesn't make you free. There are probably people sitting in this room in deeper dungeons than I've ever been in. They're just locked in the bondage of self, or they're in some type of an illusion that they're sober when they're not. And you get plenty of justification about that if you want to. It's an amazing situation. Free. I packed that freedom around with me. I know exactly what's wrong with me today as I stand here. I'm an alcoholic. I suffer from a disease called alcoholism. I'm not an alcoholic and anything. When I was and something, I separated me from you. And what we're trying to do here, or what this book seems to want me to do, is to want me to become one among many. One among many. It doesn't want me to be isolated or different from you. Because when I'm different from you, I don't have to do this. I don't need to. You don't understand. You may have to. You're alcoholic, but I'm an alcoholic and something or other. Young, old, addict, whop, whatever. It's an amazing thing to me. The book is an absolute and total master of destroying delusions to the alcoholic mind. The book will destroy delusions if you put it into operation. And all through this book, when you get to certain points of it, there are assumptions that the writer made, whether he knew it or not, that you had reached a certain point in your life by taking these actions. And if you haven't reached that point in your life, you haven't taken these actions. It's very simple. The book says it, and I believe it. If you haven't reached a point, you haven't done it yet. I don't care how many times you've skated around or how many forms or questions you've answered. If you haven't reached to a certain point in your life, you have not done it to that point. The book describes the feelings you should have. The book describes the places you should be in as a result of doing these things. And they're not talking about anything else but inside. They're talking about a spiritual realm that you should be at if you have done these things. And if you haven't done them, you're not there. Very simple. And if you're not there, you haven't done them. And if you're not there, maybe you should do them if you're an alcoholic. The book is very specific about that. The book also tells you that having made your inventory, you go share it with somebody. It tells you the whole thing. And it's an amazing thing that when you get to a certain point in your life and you've done it, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. The book says that having done this, having taken a fifth step, we go find a quiet place somewhere. And we contemplate on what we have done so far. The wording is this: has our foundation been solid to this point? That's the wording from the book. Are we building a solid foundation for which we can walk as a free man? Is the foundation, have we tried to build a foundation out of sand, or have we used cement and mortar? The book says that. I didn't say it. The book said it. And it says if you can answer your satisfaction, if you can answer to your satisfaction, then you're ready to take 6 and 7. And on page 76, it says at the top of page 76, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. See, there's an assumption again. The writer of this magnificent manuscript has assumed because it happened to him, he's sharing his experience on paper for us. Because it's happened to him, he's assuming that it has happened to you because you got to this point. There's an assumption there. It's all through this book, the assumptions, because the writer had it happen to him at a point in his life, in this course of action, these things have happened to him, and being an alcoholic of his kind, he is assuming that this has happened to you at this point in your life. And again and again and again, I'm going to tell you, if it hasn't happened, you haven't done it. If you're an alcoholic. Now, if you're not an alcoholic, what the hell difference does it make? Your life is not hanging on a thread anyhow. This is only for the desperation of the dying, as I read to you yesterday. And here's what it says. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Willingness. Now, what comes from willingness? Desperation. The desperation of the dying. I'm willing to do this. I don't want to die. We're now ready to let God remove from us all these things which we admitted are objectionable. If we haven't done an inventory and taken a fifth step, how do we know what's objectionable? How do we know anything about it all? My own thought process doesn't think some of those things are objectionable. They think they're assets. That's my thought process. Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not grow. We ask God to help us be willing. Now, here's another assumption. We're in step 6. The writer is assuming that we have come to some kind of a contact with a power greater than ourselves. He writes God. Well, why would he write that? Because it happened to him as a course of action. And then probably the most misunderstood step of all of them is step 7. It says, when ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. We have then completed step 7. The most misunderstood statement in all of Alcoholics Anonymous I just read to you. How many times have you sat in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and heard unknowing people, uninformed people speak about, I'm working on my defects of character. I'm working on my anger. Now there's a new phrase that's fallen out of these places. Issues. Issues. The book says defects of character. The book don't say issues. It doesn't say, God, thank you for removing all my defects of character, because they ain't never going to happen to you or me or anybody else. I'm a walking, talking, living example of defects of character. I still get angry. I still get jealous. I still become envious. I become greedy. I'm lustful from time to time. I know not you, because you're all spiritual giants from Alcoholics Anonymous. I have all these 7 deadly sins. And what are the defects? They're the 7 deadly sins. They were written about them thousands of years ago. I still have them all. I just don't act on most of them. But the book don't say, or the writer didn't write, in his boundless knowledge of the disease of alcoholism and the characteristic of the alcoholic. The writer didn't say that here. The writer says, I pray that you remove from me all those defects of character which will make me useful to you and to my fellows. See, that means I don't even know what they are. So why should I spend 5 minutes of my valuable time working on something that I don't know what's supposed to be removed? That's a lesson in futility. Alcoholics spend a lot of time doing that. They work on assumptions that they know what's wrong with them, and they know what they have to do to make them better. And most of them kill themselves doing it. And not only do you kill yourself doing it, you destroy the people around you by your actions. By behaving and acting like you know what will make you better. Everything in my life since I've been sober that's been bad happening to me, or which was seemingly a setback in my life, is something that I thought that I needed to make me better. I knew without a doubt when I rocked off in this course of action to get it, whatever it may be, money, property, prestige, woman, anything, I knew if I just had that, I'd be better. I knew that until I got it. And boy, I'll tell you, That's like trying to corner a tiger sometimes, for Christ's sake. Devastating. Because I have launched out on my own self-centeredness, run my own life again. I know what's wrong for me. Forget it, sponsors. You may not be quite as familiar with the situation as I am. But what I'm really saying when I do something like that is, okay, God, look at here. You're not quite as familiar with this situation as I am. After all, you never had a woman. All you did was wander around the desert, for Christ's sakes, in your dress. I'm out in the jungle. I got to have a Mercedes or something. Okay, Oldsmobile. Right. I mean, that's the thought process. And I guess it must have struck home with a lot of you because you're all, ha, 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 ha. That's the way I think. And then what happens? I got to say, oh, Christ Almighty, I've done it again. So what do? Whine and blame everybody else? No. The book says, and the Serenity Prayer says, change the things I can. That's it. So if I have created an atmosphere by wrong actions, I can take right actions to right it. Whatever it may be. Whatever it may be. It doesn't make any difference. Because no task is too difficult for me to maintain my sobriety. Because if I don't stay sober, I don't have a chance. And if I don't stay comfortable right here, I can't stay sober. You don't have to think to drink. Don't ever let any of that nonsensical bullshit that seeped into Alcoholics Anonymous buffalo you by thinking you have to think to drink. All you got to quit doing is what makes you comfortable right here, and you'll wake up drunk. You'll wake up drunk. And I tell you that because I've been sitting on the sidelines and smack dab in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous for over 40-some years, watching it happen all around me. We were given a warning a long, long time ago in the infancy of Alcoholics Anonymous. We were given the warning by a very wealthy individual, a very man who had more foresight than the alcoholic who was asking him had. His name was Rockefeller. And when we went to him hat in hand, try to get money to fund this fledgling movement of ours called Alcoholics Anonymous, he made a warning statement to us that we have since cast in the toilet by allowing outside pressure to do it. He said, money will ruin this thing. Money will ruin this thing. And with the advent and the influx of money in the treatment of alcoholism, we have watered Alcoholics Anonymous down so far that we're even trying to sober up people who don't drink, for Christ's sake. It may be funny, but it's goddamn sad where I sit. Because this is the only chance I have. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of alcoholics who are dying on the vine every day because of the watered-down message of nonsense that's been created by an outside agency filtered into Alcoholics Anonymous. And the people who are in Alcoholics Anonymous don't have enough guts or conviction of their courage to stand up and say so. They don't. And you can go anywhere in the world, in any meeting that you go to, and there's more of those people in there than there are the other kind. It's just a very simple thing. The book says that we make a list of all the people we've harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. I think sometimes people run out and make a list. The book says you don't have to make a list. You've already made one when you took an inventory. Bill's trying to get us not to duplicate it, trying to save a shortcut. Then it said we make direct amends to those we have harmed except when to do so would injure them or others. And we're not out there trying to help anybody else. We're out there to clean up the wreckage of our past. That's what we're doing. That's what the amends are about. The amends are about erasing the nightmares or the actions that you took that makes you thirsty. That's what it is. Sit back here in the back of your mind, some little, I'm not talking about the macho stuff you did, like whooping on some sucker or shooting him. Yeah. Talking about them little nickel and dime crappy things that you do out there. Penny, easy. You didn't go to sleep. No, you're on the right side of the room. You don't sleep over there. It's over here. I try to be kind. I'm going to tell you a quick story, and I got to tell you the story because it means so much to me, because I got down to the last name on my list. I was 12 years out of a penitentiary. I ain't got a lot of money. I'm working. My wife has come back, mother of my children. She committed suicide in my 6 years sobriety, the mother of my children. And I got this one name on the bottom of that list that kept gnawing at me all the time. Gnawing, it always. I just thought about it constantly. It bothered me constantly. It was the name of my father. And the last time I saw my father, I was strapped down on a bed in Manager's Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, and my father come to see me, and I spit in his face and told him, "Get out of here, you son of a bitch." It took me a long time to realize that I didn't hate my father as much as I hated me for what I had become. I was so ashamed of what I had become that I took my natural course of action and lashed out at my father. True, my dad was a drunk. True, my dad never took care of me. True, my mother raised me. All those. True, my dad beat me when I was a child, because I never stopped to think that I was attacking him for attacking my mother. But that has nothing to do with it. I just hated him. And I lived with that hate. And so I finally found out from my mother where he was. I had an address in a little place in a town I was born in, Lawrence, Kansas, and I loaded my 2 kids in a car, a little Volkswagen, and we took off across the United States, and we went back and we found this. We headquartered in a little town 30 miles from where I was born. And I remember the day I got up. I was going to go down there to face the dragon, so to speak. I must have thought I was Don Quixote or some damn thing. I don't know what it was, but I was going to go down there and fight a windmill. And whatever it was, I was going to do it because I couldn't take it no longer. And I remember driving down there. I got on the expressway, and I'm headed down to this little town, and I got a feeling in my stomach like I was going to throw up at any minute. My head started to throb. I thought it was going to explode from in here. And we got to this little place, and the address I had was a beer joint called Johnny's, kind of apropos. And the address I had was a little room around behind this beer joint, and there was nobody answered the door. And so I went into the bar, and there he sat on a bar stool. Didn't have any socks on, pair of tennis shoes, a little forlorn creature. And I walked up to him and I said, "Dad?" He said, "I'm your son, Johnny. I've driven out here from California just to tell you I don't hate you anymore." He said, "You want a beer?" I said, "No, shortly after the last time I saw you, I joined a group of people called themselves Alcoholics Anonymous, don't drink anymore. And I've got your grandchildren you've never seen in the car, and they'd like to spend a day with you, and so would I." We rode around, we saw things that I was born on. I saw my grandmother's house where I played as a child, and I saw the bridge that I came to under as a child, one of my first drunk, and all these little things, and I'm still ready to die. I think my head's going to explode. And I said to him on the way back, I said, "You know what, Dad, I got a great big house in California. I'm doing well, and room for you. Why don't you come out and let me take care of you?" He looked at me and he said, "No, take me back where you found me." So he got out of the car, and my oldest daughter, Karen, said, "Here, Grandpa," and she handed him a picture of me and her sister. And I watched my father drift off back into that little den of iniquity. And we got in the car and we got back on the freeway, and an amazing thing happened to me. My stomach settled and my head didn't hurt anymore. And it's almost like I'd had an exorcism of some sort. And what had happened with me is that the word hate had been removed from my system through no effort of my own. I don't use that word anymore in describing anything. I haven't from that day to this. It's just not part of my vocabulary because it's not there. And I know the feeling of cleaning up the wreckage of your past. I know that feeling. And I like to think that the rest of my life, or the rest of his life, my father, who's dead now, every once in a while he staggered into that little beer joint and held up the picture and said, "This is my son and my grandchildren. They came out from California to see me." Now, I don't know whether they did that or not, or whether he did it or not. But it gives me great pleasure to think maybe he did that once or twice before he died. And there's nothing between my father and I when he died. Could you imagine having to live the rest of my life with that type of hatred in me for an individual and nothing I can do about it? Don't sell this thing short. Don't deny it and put it aside by saying your case is different, that you have to do this or you have to do that, or because some outside agency figures they have a better remedy for your illness than we do. Don't sell yourself short. Don't sacrifice your soul for some synthetic idea or some synthetic bypass of Alcoholics Anonymous. Don't sell your soul for it. I'm very grateful that when I came back, California, I called my sponsor. "Norm, what do you want, jackass?" Favorite passage. "I finished my list of amends, Norm." He said, "Oh, no, you haven't." I said, "What do you mean I haven't?" He said, "You owe the state of California amends." I said, "What do you mean I owe the state of California amends? I did my time. I got paroled. I'm done. I'm discharged from parole." He said, "No. You got to go get a pardon." Come on. What do you need a pardon for? I'm an AA. I'm be pardoned as long as I don't drink. He got all the answers. You know what I mean? As slick as me. And so just so he wouldn't yell at me anymore, and because I was afraid of him, I was afraid he's going to throw me out of AA. That's what I was afraid of. I went down and started the process to get a full and unconditional pardon. And this was a terrible situation. I had to go to Los Angeles and file a certificate of rehabilitation, and the lady said, "You have to go down to the Long Beach Police Department and register." Okay. I'm out on God's mission. Nothing can harm me anymore. I'm an AA. And I go down, I walk into this desk sergeant, and I tell him I'm here to register. People up at the district attorney's office, the county attorney said, "I'm supposed to come down here and register." He said, "What's your price?" "Well, I'm registering as a drug offender." Go in there and see that guy in there, the lieutenant in charge of narcotics. I'm still under God's wings, you know. I wandered in and said to the lieutenant, "I'm here to register." He says, "For what?" I says, "For being a drug offender." He says, "When did you get out?" I said, 1961. This is 1973. He jumped up, ran around, grabbed me, and put the handcuffs on me, and threw me in a chair like that. I guess you would have thought, well, God knows what he's doing, huh? Maybe that's for you, but not me. My first thought was, "You son of a bitch, Norm Alpe. I ever get out of these handcuffs, I'm going to kick your butt." chase your skinny butt all over the world. And so the lieutenant stood in front of me and he said, where have you been? I said, been right here in Long Beach. He said, why haven't you registered for this? I said, because I never had to and nobody told me I was supposed to. He said, when did you say you got out? I said, 1961, if it would interest you. Everything about this man changed as I was talking to him. It's like a light came on. He walked over, picked me up, and he said, why are you here? And I said, well, if you'd be interested, I'd like to tell you I'm filing for a certificate of rehabilitation to get my full and unconditional pardon. I wanted to tell him I was ordered by my sponsor. But no. He changed. He took the handcuffs off of me and wiped my wrist and said to me, son, you go on out in that world. If anybody ever questions you about this again, you send them to me. And I was, he changed. I wanted to ask him why, but I was trying to get out of there. But he, like they're prone to do, will give you the information if you'd stand still for a second, He says, I have been a lieutenant in the Long Beach Narcotic Division for almost 22 years. You're the first person with your record that has ever sat across my desk and asked for a certificate of rehabilitation. Yeah. He said, now you go on out there. I shrugged my shoulders and kind of jelly rolled out the joint, Knew it all along, Norm, you're never wrong. A few years later, I stood in front of the same judge, the calendar judge, Superior Court judge, state of California, who sentenced me to 20 years in the penitentiary, and have him offer me a certificate of rehabilitation. Sitting in that room was my wife, my children, my in-laws, and my mother. And this is what he said. Being a calendar judge in Superior Court in the state of California, I don't get a chance to do very many decent things. Most of my things are very, very harmful, and I have to do them because it's law. He said, but I'm very pleased to be allowed to issue you a certificate of rehabilitation, and I'm personally going to petition the governor to give you a full and unconditional pardon. I want to say, that ain't what you said in 1957, Judge. You called me a blood-sucking parasite in society. Said I didn't have any right being around decent people. Don't you want to take those words back now? You real how you've scarred me for all these years and kept me in bondage? That's the way an alcoholic thinks. But I had been in AA enough, and I was afraid if I'd said it, Norm would have hit me. But that's what I thought. I mean, I got all chesty and egotistical, Turn around and keep them crying if you want to know the truth. It's an amazing thing. Don't sell it short. For God's sakes, I can't tell you, emphasize enough to you, do not sell it short. The amends, we lose more people in Alcoholics Anonymous when it comes to cleaning up the wreckage of the past than we ever do. There's a movement somewhere in AA where everybody wants to write an inventory every other day. That's because they don't want to do the 9th step. They just want to write inventories. They want to write inventories. The only people who make any business out of that is the stationery stores. It's because it's easier to go back and overdo it, redo it. It becomes less painful. And basically what it is therapy. All you're doing is digging up the resentments of the past to make them available for you to have more resentful at, for being resentful at it. That's why the people keep doing it. That's all it is. I'm not telling you never to take another inventory. I'm telling you that a constant barrage of writing all the time creates nothing. It's nothing more than therapy. It just creates one resentment right after another. It's an undone statement, and to get it done, you've got to go on through it. You've got to complete the task. My sponsor, Norm Alpe, had one of the greatest sayings that I've ever heard in my entire life. And this is the truth. He said, come in here, buy the whole package, and go out there and spend a day in the world just being yourself. What will happen to you if you ever spend a day being yourself? You will be introduced to a stranger. Because we don't know what ourselves are. I used to lay up in a cell in solitary confinement and ask myself questions. Whatever happened to that little blonde-headed, blue-eyed kid who wanted to play baseball? Whatever happened to him? His only ambition in life was to play baseball. Had all the opportunities to go to universities, to go Major League Baseball, had all the talent to do all those things. Whatever happened to him, I used to say to myself. What happened to him? My life depended on it then, like it depends on it today. I didn't know then, I know today. I'm an alcoholic. I suffered from a disease called alcoholism. I can't take the first drink of alcohol. I can't drink and live, and of myself I can't keep from drinking. And my main function and business of life is to not take a drink of alcohol. The book Alcoholics Anonymous, I hate to keep reminding you of this, keep pointing this back, because my experience is today, if you want to hide anything from alcoholics, put it in the book. They don't look there. They got some other type of psychobabble bull crap that they want to come up with. Or some well-meaning person sitting next to them and said, I ain't never took a goddamn inventory. I've been sober 5 or 6 years. My answer to them is, I'd wish you went after 5 or 6 years, be my guest. The book says the main purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous, the main purpose of this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, this program, is to dispel the demons and make us useful, happy, and whole. That's maybe not paraphrased, but that is essential to keep us from the first drink of alcohol. To do these things is amazing. I was on an airplane one time, and you hear this all the time. I was on an airplane one time with a lady who was like a mother to me, and her name was Elsa, and she was a staunch member of Al-Anon, and we were going to Toronto to participate in a convention up there. And I'm riding with her, Nick. I'm rolling that cart down the aisle, and she said to me, honey, I'm going to have a drink. And she said, you don't mind? I said, no. I don't care at all. She said, well, after all, we're in the same program. I said, no, we're not. If you work my program, you wouldn't need to drink. If you work my program, you won't need any antidepressants. If you live my life of service to God and to my fellow man, and share my experience, strength, and hope with anybody that wants it, you won't need to drink. You won't need to be uncomfortable. You'll become useful and happy and whole, and you will not need any antidepressants. I got a guy here in my group, guy I sponsor, who is a living testimony of that to me. He doesn't take antidepressants. He took them right up until the time he got a hold of made the pact with the devil. And now he's still goofy as hell, but he's living a good, clean, sober life. We're not going to have a session at 1 o'clock. We're going to have free time to go out and play and do the stuff, because there's been an awful lot of stuff said. There's been an awful lot of stuff to digest, an awful lot of stuff for you to debate with your fellows, and whether it's right or wrong. But if you're going to get into that debate, I want you to go to the authority of it. I don't want you to trigger what goes against your treatment facility or your counselor or your therapist or your pharmacist. I want you to debate on what the book Alcoholics Anonymous has said and what I've said about this book called Alcoholics Anonymous, because this is the sum total of what Alcoholics Anonymous is. If it ain't in this book, it's just hearsay. It has no useful purpose for the recovery of alcoholism if it's not in this book. All you do in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you stay sober, is share your experience, strength, and hope with one another. If you don't have any experience, you don't have any strength. And if you don't have any strength, you cannot install any hope in anybody. It's just very, very simple. Bill says we share our experience, strength, and hope with somebody. I have been privileged to do a lot of things in Alcoholics Anonymous. Very privileged. One of the great privileges was bestowed on me a couple weeks ago when I was allowed to go into Folsom State Prison, where I served some time. And I got to see exactly what I'm talking to you about happen and the results of it. It has nothing to do with me, but it has to do with everything that this book teaches us. I sit in a room with 300 convicts. I visited with them for an hour, my friend Greg and I. We wandered around and visited with him and talked to him, and I made fun of him and laughed. And the guy told me he had 24 years in a natural life. I said, that'll hold you, dude. One guy said, I'm in for kidnapping. I said, get out of here. We're some badasses over at this table. We kill people. He said, man, well, I said, what are you in for kidnapping? His drug deal went wrong, bud. That's okay, homie. I talked that stuff to him. But I saw a man get up. His all intentions were fine and dandy. Fine and dandy. His intentions were, I know they were honorable. I cannot say they weren't honorable. I know he's a good man. But he tried to explain to these people what he was like in Alcoholics Anonymous. He stood up and started talking about the day he came into Alcoholics Anonymous and tried to take them through the steps. Now, if you want to see, you don't need any sleeping pills if you sit around with some guy who will try to tell you how to go through the steps without sharing their experience. And it was kind of sad. I was kind of giggling because I like to watch the convicts. They had their head down on the table. A couple of them got out the dominoes and started playing. The amazing thing was, I got to talk to them. And I told them about sitting in the back row when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, how I'd been raised in institutions in the state of California and the federal government. And I built a bridge of understanding between me and them. And then I told them what had happened to me. You see what I'm saying? The book is very specific about this. What we were like, what happened to us, and what we're trying to be like today. That's the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. The message of Alcoholics Anonymous, what has happened to me, is these 12 steps of this program of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the message in A. If you haven't had it happen to you, you don't have a message. How's that? I've told you time and time and time again, the writer of this magnificent manuscript wrote to us about his experience, things that he had done to bring about these results. And he wrote it down so the message would not be garbled. This is it's here. This is man's experience in the recovery from the disease of alcoholism, and we have watered it down so far that it's almost unheard of. Do you know I go to meetings from time to time and they don't have a book on the podium? In our workshop one night, our meetings down there in Bellflower, the groups and meetings that we all go to, we read the 5th chapter out of the book. We read the 12 traditions out of the book. The book is on the podium. We don't have any of these printed things that make it easier for us. And the reason we don't is one time in our workshop, we had one of them forms that you get from central office, that tells you how to do things. And we read that form like a little folder. Have a little folder on how it works, and 3rd chapter and the 5th chapter, and they're all printed in big letters and everything. And in our workshop, somebody talked about the book Alcoholic Newcomer, walked up to me after me and said, I want one of them big books. I said, okay. Took him over the literature training. He said, no, not the big book, the one you have on the podium. See what I'm talking about? You see, I'm talking about a watered-down message. He wants the big book, and he thinks the big book is a folder with 4 printed sheets in it. That's what I'm saying to you. The main purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous is to create an identity for the alcoholic who still suffers. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't been in AA very long. It means the alcoholic who still suffers. And the way you do that is build a bridge of understanding and identification, because the main purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous is for identification. Narcotic Anonymous was formed by a bunch of alcoholics who needed to form some identification with drug addicts. So you have NA. Gamblers Anonymous was formed by members of Alcoholics Anonymous who needed to form some identity with gamblers. The man who formed Gamblers Anonymous is held in reference in Gamblers Anonymous the way we hold Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Reverence here. He died drunk. How do you like that? Because he was diverted from his primary purpose. If you're an alcoholic, you better stay the course. If you're not alcoholic, it's all Greek. So let's take a break and come back and we'll answer questions.